Hello and welcome to Newswatch with me, Samira Ahmed. Later on the programme. This man was on our screens again this week. Is the BBC giving Nigel Farage too much airtime? And was coverage of the new US administration's travel ban balanced and impartial, or did it pander to a growing anti-Trump hysteria? First, the Prime Minister's visit to the United States at the end of last week to meet President Trump was the subject of considerable media analysis, not least the moment when the two appeared briefly holding hands. But some people were more exercised by a question put at a news conference by the BBC's Laura Kuenssberg.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister. Mr. President, you've said before that torture works. You've praised Russia. You've said you want to ban some Muslims from coming to America. You've suggested there should be punishment for abortion. For many people in Britain, those sound like alarming beliefs. What do you say to our viewers at home who are worried about some of your views and worried about you becoming the leader of the free world?
This was your choice of a question. There goes that relationship.
So did one question from a reporter have the potential to damage the special relationship? Some thought it might have done, and that Laura Kuenssberg needed some lessons in diplomacy. Here's Jonathan Chappell.
I was left guessing at the motives of asking such a provocative question to someone so easily provoked as Donald Trump. Was the motive to undermine the embryonic relationship between the two leaders? Or was it the BBC trying to make the news rather than simply report it? Or was Laura Kuenssberg showboating her questioning skills? Whatever the motives, asking that question to Donald Trump in that forum lacked emotional intelligence.
But you have also said you would be frank.
Had Donald Trump taken offence to the question, it could have had an impact on the future health and prosperity of the UK economy as a whole. The BBC and Laura Kuenssberg are in a privileged position to be able to ask questions at press conferences like this. Don't abuse that privilege.
No surprise that as the week went on, coverage of Donald Trump's presidency continued to exercise Newswatch viewers, in particular the BBC's reporting of the petition urging the government to call off the president's proposed state visit to Britain, which those complaining described to us as excessive and hysterical. And of the ban on travellers from 7 countries to the United States, some felt certain aspects of that ban had been largely ignored by BBC News.
The list of countries facing the travel ban were originally drawn up by the Obama administration and not invented by Trump. Second, many Muslim countries themselves impose a travel ban on the citizens of many countries, including UK citizens, simply because they have visited Israel.
There's been little evidence of fair, unbiased reporting showing both sides of the story. It's patently obvious the current issue is not anti-Muslim but anti-terrorist or anti-ISIS. But the reporters keep trying to push this question into the face of anyone they can to get an impact for viewers.
On Monday's BBC News, apart from the briefest of interviews with 3 people on Staten Island who have not been outraged by this ban, no interviews or mention was made that many millions of people in the US are not outraged by this executive order. Further, the BBC has used the online unaudited petition, which is completely open to fraudulent signatories, as a barometer of public opinion in the UK, yet over 45 million adult UK registered voters are not outraged to sign this petition. The outrage is that those who are not outraged are deemed irrelevant to the BBC.
While I totally disagree with Trump's outrageous claims about fake news or the dishonesty of the media, these claims can only gain credence and credibility if responsible and reputable news organisations like the BBC fail to present unbiased, impartial, accurate and honest news reporting or fair and balanced debates and discussions.
That debate will certainly continue, but there was at least one BBC programme that featured a clear defence of President Trump's travel ban, BBC One's Sunday Politics. The guest was Nigel Farage, and Andrew Neil began by asking him if he agreed with the president's decision to bar Syrian refugees indefinitely from entering the United States.
There are 7 countries on that list. He's entitled to do this. He was voted in on this ticket.
I didn't ask you if he was entitled. That's not my point of contention. I asked you if you agreed with it.
Well, I do, because I think that if you just look at what is happening in France and Germany, if you look at Mrs. Merkel's policy on this, which was to allow anybody in virtually from anywhere, look what it's led to.
The former leader of the United Kingdom Independence Party went on to discuss his views on immigration and on the government's process for leaving the European Union. And the interview produced a strong reaction from viewers, many of whom have objected before about the frequency of his appearances on BBC News bulletins and programmes such as Question Time. 2 viewers recorded their thoughts for us on camera.
The aim is balance, but this isn't balance. This is a platform. His constant appearances on TV and radio, not just on the BBC, are a major contribution, I think, to the rise in anti-immigrant sentiment in this country in the last few years. I think it's time the BBC recognised that Nigel Farage isn't just some politician you wheel on to give a microphone to when someone says something nice about refugees. He is a rallying point.
The BBC treats Nigel Farage as good box office, giving him photo opportunities in pubs, hugely disproportionate access to political shows from BBC Question Time to Daily Politics, Sunday Politics, and much more. By doing so, and by not challenging him, partly because he was treated in the first stages as just good box office, as light entertainment, they helped normalise his views and helped him to put things without challenge that actually affected the whole way the debate moved. This happened from the very beginning, and it's only in the last 2 years that he started to be challenged a bit, and by that time the normalisation had happened.
Well, Hugh Milbourne from the Sunday Politics programme joins me now. Why did you have Nigel Farage on?
Well, the main stories this week were Theresa May's visit to Washington, and then there was a subsequent massive story which has dominated the headlines this week of Donald Trump's travel ban. And the other big story of the week was, of course, on Brexit and the Commons debates about the passage of Article 50. So those are big stories, and Nigel Farage was a guest who was an appropriate guest on both those stories. He was the first British politician to meet Donald Trump after his election, and obviously he was a massive player in the referendum campaign.
A lot of you say he's not UKIP leader now, and he may not be as close to Trump as he claims to be.
Well, we regularly on the BBC invite politicians onto our programmes, ex-leaders. Ed Miliband's been on the BBC this week, for example. Nick Clegg's a regular guest on our programmes. So it's not unusual that we should invite someone on a programme who isn't currently leader of their party.
But they're also both MPs, and Nigel Farage has never been an MP.
Yeah, but he is an MEP. He has been elected by the British people as an MEP by his constituents. And he's also leader of his party's political group in the European Parliament. So he's still a person of some influence.
A lot of viewers say he's just easy ratings, isn't he? He always has been. And you know when you invite him on, he'll say something controversial.
No, I mean, he represents a strand of political thinking in the United Kingdom. There's no doubt about that. As party leader, he had a track record of political success. For example, his party came first in the European elections in 2014. At the general election in 2015, the party in the popular vote came third. So this is someone who we aren't able to exclude from our programmes. He's got a track record of electoral success, and he does represent a strand of political thinking in British politics.
Many people do find what he says offensive, particularly as we heard in those viewer comments there.
Yeah.
His comments on immigration in the current climate, people feel that he's stirred up anti-immigrant sentiment. Do you think it's responsible to have him on?
Well, not everyone's going to like what he says, and there are all sorts of people that we get on our programmes that some of our viewers are going to disagree with.
But it's not just that they disagree, though, is it? It's about whether it's responsible when some people feel there's a growing climate of tension around immigration and the BBC chooses to have on someone that viewers feel holds views that are stirring up anti-immigrant sentiment.
The BBC just can't be involved in making value judgments about politicians.
Ethical judgments.
They can't. Not when they've got when they come from a major party. UKIP is a major party. There's no doubt about that. We can't be making value judgments about whether what they've got to say is, morally dubious. That's not our role. We're an impartial broadcaster. There's no evidence that Nigel Farage ever said anything that's illegal, for example. That's never been a risk. I don't think that he should be treated any differently than any other politician from any of the other major political parties in the United Kingdom.
You obviously work on Sunday politics and daily politics, but you'll know we hear great viewer concern about how often Farage is invited onto BBC programmes generally, including Question Time. We also know, of course, that he now has his own radio show on commercial radio. Do you think the BBC does have him on too often?
Well, I know from our outlets, so the Daily Politics and the Sunday Politics, it's only the second time he's been on in the last 6 months. I think he's made about half a dozen other appearances in terms of interviews or being part of panels or part of discussions on BBC television over the last 6 months. So I don't think that is too great a number. And of course, on our programmes, obviously Andrew Neil's a very robust interviewer, and we always want politicians of the highest calibre from whatever political party.
Hugh Milbourne, thank you very much. And thanks to all of you who recorded or sent us your views on this week. Now, your opinions on BBC News and Current Affairs could feature on next week's programme. You can contact us by telephone on 0370 010 6676 or email newswatch@bbc.co.uk. You can also post your comments on Twitter. We're @NewsWatchBBC, and you can watch previous discussions on our website, bbc.co.uk/newswatch. That's all from us. We'll be back to hear your thoughts about BBC News coverage again next week. Goodbye.